Hi, Sally, and welcome. Usually we have something called the Improving Lives in the Caribbean podcast, but this time around we're doing it as a video cast. And I'm really happy to hear from you, and I'm sure everyone else is as well, about the potential for hydrogen energy in the Caribbean. So I want to welcome you to this blog video cast and just ask you to introduce yourself a bit to us. Tell us a bit about your background. Who are you, and what's your relationship to the IDB?
Thanks, Golda. I'm always excited to be speaking with you specifically about the kind of work that IDB is doing in the Caribbean region. I am Australian. You can tell by the dodgy accent. I'm working out of the Bay Area, San Francisco. I'm a futurist and I'm an entrepreneur and I'm an inventor. So I generally, and I invent in a very strange space. I've done some sustainability inventions, but also some material stuff. And I'm one of those people who it's like the anti-specialist. So as Chris Bangle, the innovative BMW designer said, my knowledge is an inch deep and a mile wide. So I go with that. So I am a sustainability expert. I've done a lot of stuff around materials, sustainable energy. My design work is in a couple of museums. And most of my time now I spend, because after I turned 50, I decided that every piece of the work I do needed to have massive impact. And so my work began with IDB on the Pivot project, part of the Build Forward initiative. And I was asked to run a series of workshops around what might a sustainable transport future look like for the entire region by 2050. And I think my first response to the brief was, why 2050? Way too late. Let's get it done sooner. Because we can, right? What excites me about the region is that we can. And so I ran this workshop. We came up with pretty quickly, a whole lot of locals and entrepreneurs were involved in this. We came up with this idea of a scalable hydrogen vehicle where we could actually transform entirely the region's economy and kind of address social justice and disparity issues by having free or nearly free energy throughout the region. And as I worked with all these locals, helping inform my knowledge of what went down, looking at your abundant natural resources, it suddenly became so clear that this region, with its oceans, its sun, and its wind, is ideally positioned to lead the world in green hydrogen. So I began by talking about sustainable transport with the bank, and it rapidly transitioned into what might that really cutting edge, bleeding edge green hydrogen future look like. And that's where I am at the moment, halfway through my report on how do we transform and kind of lead the world in sustainable energy using green hydrogen.
One of the things that we know about you here, Sally, is that you're really just very passionate about what you do. And I love the way that you're communicating the fact that we have such abundant resources. Now, in the Caribbean, we've been talking about renewable energy sources for a very long time. Why is green hydrogen different, or why is it better suited to us in the region?
I think there's a real trick with speaking about renewable energy. Most people, when they think about renewable, think about solar, for instance, right? And most people have grown up with an understanding that when solar is converted from the power that comes into the power that we use, we have inefficiencies. The conversion rate is not great. And so solar has never really made a massive dent, unless it's at massive industrial scale, right? And similarly, wind. When people think about renewables, they might think solar, they might think wind, and they usually think, oh, it's a nice to have, but it can't transform. But here is where hydrogen kicks the ball so much higher and excites me. I've been a massive hydrogen person for so long as the car commentator, and all my colleagues for years have gone, it'll never happen. People will just be electric. But, we're still talking electrolysis. But what we can do in this region is, for a start, offshore wind. So offshore wind is only just being explored around the world. But one of the US energy gurus here said there is enough potential with offshore wind to power 90% of the USA. So consider the wind in the Caribbean region and the power drag in the Caribbean region, and you'll immediately be able to offset that with offshore wind, right? So the benefit of that also is that you can use the foundations of the offshore wind towers to create biohabitats and actually create abundant sea life, abundant lobsters, abundant whatever you want. That's another piece of research I'm doing for the bank. So, everything converges. But hydrogen is a key because it's energy dense. It gives us a range in a vehicle comparable to gasoline. And the stumbling block with hydrogen has always been, how do we store it? It's complicated. And up until really recently, it has taken fossil fuels to produce, or maybe blue hydrogen, which is using kind of waste energy, but it still has a carbon cost. But what I've come up with for this region is I've identified incredible technology that allows us to turn seawater into hydrogen at an energy cost that's doable with renewables. So this is where I'm an excitable person. It's true. I'm an optimist, but this, in terms of the work I could be doing anywhere in the world right now, the idea that you have enough resources to not only make the energy we need, but to use seawater, which, by the way, is also desalinating at the same time. It's crazy. It's so doable.
So, Sally, how far away are we from this right now? How far away is the Caribbean from using seawater to create energy that could be used in a million different ways?
Well, my report has just, as of this morning, morphed into a carbon neutral economy. We're going to focus on industrialized. So we're going to look at Trinidad as, possibly way more complex and not the low hanging fruit that somewhere like Jamaica or the Barbados might be in terms of grabbing green energy. But in terms of transforming a region, if we can go in and pipe salt water to some of the existing geothermal in that region, I believe we will be making green hydrogen from seawater within 5 years. Is that ambitious? Of course it is. But we're in an era of massive disruption. And so now is a time when we can leapfrog what other countries are doing. Germany's just said they're committing €8 billion to green hydrogen. I think we can do something really effective for a fraction of that budget way more quickly.
Can we get a quick explanation for those watching of the carbon neutral cycle? A quick layman's explanation.
A really quick one. I'm going to use the green hydrogen because this is just so beautiful for this region. So imagine this. We have salt water, right? We have so much salt water and we have wind. So let's lose solar for the moment and say we'll either use offshore wind, or for the short term, let's use some of our existing geothermal. So you already have production of geothermal energy in Trinidad and in a couple of other places. Imagine that we pipe salt water to there. So we use renewable energy to create hydrogen. And then here's the carbon neutral piece. So already by using renewable energy, that very definition means we haven't pushed carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Now we have this salty brine, which is the waste. So when we convert the salt water to hydrogen, we end up with this salty mix at the end. We don't throw it away because we're looking at a future forward circular economy. We take the salty brine. You can either create fabulous gourmet Caribbean salt, go for it, or we can take it and create salt batteries, sodium ion batteries, which are low cost, highly effective, 30 times less expensive than lithium ion. And we can hand out batteries throughout the region to store that hydrogen. So this idea of closed means we not only don't put any carbon dioxide in the production of this energy into the atmosphere. When the hydrogen that's stored is used, the only byproduct is fresh, pure water. So this is an example of circular. We bring in seawater, we convert it into a usable energy without creating any carbon dioxide emissions. When it's used, it creates no emissions. So, you have an electric vehicle. At some point, unless you used fully renewable, when you charge that, you did emit carbon dioxide into the atmosphere if any fossil fuel provided you with your energy. But in this scenario, zero carbon dioxide output, and the possibility to even sequester carbon dioxide and become positive carbon dioxide.
Now that sounds really, really impressive. And it definitely is the direction that we in the region want to go in. But of course, listening to you, the question is, what will it take to get us there? What is the initial investment going to be like in order to achieve this cycle?
Well, you can stand by for the second half of my report, because now I'm working with the bank's engineers who are, I would just say, call out to your engineers, starting with Christian Blanco. I'm so used to working with engineers, do it all the time. And often engineers, they're brilliant thinkers, but they're often very risk averse and very conservative. Your team is so future ready and so able to take a vision and start looking at how do we get that done and how can we convert it. I think the passion is really obvious. And so they're really helping me make a deliverable that is super doable. So I guess what we need is for every person that listens to this to feel like this is what they need, this is what we need, and to push it. Because of course, the only thing that will get in the way is politics. Where part of the report will be identifying funding and trying to attract pilot projects from around the world to this region, which will also generate jobs, localization of technology. I mean, I believe it will be a huge, exciting horizon for the entire region as a world power player. And I think that we can make it happen because of your internal engineers and the ability they have to take something that's, quite technical and convert it into, here is where we can apply it, and here is where we can do it in 5 years.
And that's what we're working on right now. So thank you so much, Sally, for just taking the time to chat with us about this. It is really exciting. We have a long way to go, but I think once everyone in the region gets on board and understands the vision and what we could achieve, it could be done in less than 5 years. Thank you so much.
Get on board with a hydrogen ferry. Stand by for that.